All right, guys. I've got about half an hour before I got to go, so I've got to keep this short. Um, so we've had Trump float the idea in his first term about privatizing the U.S. Postal Service, and he's kind of brought it back again. And of course, the GOP are acting like it's this great idea, as they tend to do. Absolutely fucking retarded idea. The United States Postal Service, I don't think people really appreciate all that they do. It's 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 a public good, and it's also basically infrastructure. It's like it's like the bedrock, the foundation on which our a massive part of our society relies. Like everything from mail-in voting, like all sorts of shit. They deal with like Amazon won't even deal with many rural areas, and they rely on the United States Postal Service to finish deliveries. And that's the problem when your whole issue is profit. The last thing anyone should be thinking about doing is making fucking mail carrying a profit based business model. That is fucking retarded, and it will screw everyone. Like, most especially, like fucking your old grandma that lives out in the middle of damn nowhere. End up getting charged like $150 for a simple piece of fucking mail because they don't deliver out there because it's not profitable. Like, this is absolute imbecility. Like, I can't even fucking put it into words. Anyhow, I'm going to read an old parts of an old article, and I'll try to remember to post the link in the description. This is from 2020, but pretty much everything that it says is still relevant today. Let's see. Introduction. The financial problems of the United States Postal Service are the result of misguided policy decisions, some of them long-standing, not declines in first-class mail, its primary source of revenue. With the increased demands of voting by mail in a national election and a boom in home package delivery, the pandemic makes a well-resourced postal service more important than ever. Nostrums about the public debt have contributed to a decades-long bipartisan attack on the U.S. public sector, including the Postal Service. In the absence of negative consequences from the huge run-up of federal debt during the COVID-19 pandemic, and thanks to repeated Republican Party perfidy with respect to their own purported concerns about deficit spending, political anguish about debt has withered. At the same time, the pandemic has exposed chronic deficiencies in the government's capacity to satisfy its most basic obligation to safeguard the health of the population. The weakening of the Postal Service's ability to fulfill its responsibilities in the name of self-financing dovetails with the current massive misfeasance of the federal government in the field of public health. A functioning post has become crucial for the conduct of an honest national election that is all about public health. This report motivates the national interest in a robust postal service. Its historical contribution to the nation's economic development acquires new relevance for those chronically excluded from the benefits of economic growth, including those in isolated, low-income rural areas, regions devastated by deindustrialization, and racially segregated urban communities. In the wake of the economic collapse, its rejuvenation could offer relief to bankrupted suburban small businesses, including those conducted from the kitchen table. The roots of the current crisis in postal finances lie in the long-standing misconceptions about and unrealistic expectations for fundamental public functions. This paper proposes a clear alternative to neoliberal wishes for, quote, sustainable business models or outright privatization. The bane of a thriving postal service is the principle that it should be self-financing. In other words, that its operation should be limited by the costs that can defray from the sale of stamps and the like directly to customers. Self-financing fundamentally undermines the USPS's historic mission of serving every community in the nation, the traditional, quote, universal service obligation, USO mandate that is a matter of federal law. From the colonial times of its founder, Benjamin Franklin, the service's struggle over self-funding has waxed and waned, along with broader political currents. The progressive view has generally discounted the salience of self-funding and upheld the post as a public service in the national interest. On the strength of vigorous populist and progressive movements, by 1912, the USPS, originally named the Post Office Department, had expanded its scope of operations to package delivery and banking. It was also angling to take over or postalize new forms of communication, the telegraph and telephone. A self-funding mandate would be the death knell of a universal service of particular importance for rural and low-income areas. It would entail the elimination of less used postal facilities and more costly delivery routes, especially in Alaska and Hawaii. It would bring cutbacks in hours of operation, the end of weekend delivery, the end of uniform pricing, triggering increases for households and business firms in rural areas, and a reduction in labor standards that would have ripple effects for other workers. Less obvious, but perhaps more important, a retreat from a dynamic, modern public postal service would represent a further retreat from the U.S., quote, stealth industrial policy that has served us well in the past. So there's a whole lot of other stuff here. I'm going to kind of flip through it, mainly because I don't have time. And also, you probably don't want to hear every single little detail. Let's hit the conclusion here. Since its founding over 200 years ago, the United States Postal Service has provided a significant boost to the nation's prosperity and well-being. Privatization for the sake of self-financing is a move in the wrong direction. The service should be returned to a department of the federal government proper, opportunities for expansion explored, and any shortfalls in operating costs or promised benefits to postal workers should be covered by regular budget appropriations. This choice typifies the broader economic debates over progressive change and neoliberalism. The neoliberal stance is to take the decline in first-class mail as given, arbitrarily accept the nostrum of self-funding, and then ruminate on ways to carve up the service until revenues cover costs. But revenues need not capture benefits. That is the essence of a public good. It cannot be financed directly and separately by each of its consumers. Shrinkage or expansion, narrow financing by user fees, or ample funding by general revenue. In a nutshell, these are the basic choices for the direction of the U.S. public sector and the economy as a whole. A strong public sector, and postal service in particular, are especially essential under the dual threats of a pandemic and an economic recession. Geez, I cannot read today. To be fair, I've only recently woken up, but yeah. So this is also like a pattern with especially the GOP. I don't want to make it sound like it's they have a monopoly over this sort of behavior, because the Democrats have done it a little bit as well, but it's primarily the GOP. They do this thing where they literally implement regulations or some sort of legislation that will harm a public good or service or department or whatever. They cause it to fail, and then they point to that failure as, this is why we need to either get rid of it, completely cut costs, or privatize it, or whatever, just so that like fucking billionaires can be happy and swoop in and make a bunch of money off of it, and Americans are fucked in the process. So they've done this a lot over time, like to many, many different things. But like now they're trying it with the United States Postal Service, and it should be fucking obvious that this is stupid as fuck. Like, no, you do not win if the fucking postal service is privatized. And it doesn't take a lot of brain power to figure out why. Everything will be looked at through a lens of fucking like fiscal profit, basically. Like, if it's not making profit, then that's the entire fucking purpose of a business or a corporation. Like, that is the last thing we fucking need. And it will make a couple of people wealthy and fuck over everyone else, just like it always does. And aside from that, there aren't any massive issues. Like, yes, it has to be backed and kind of bailed out every once in a while, but that's why we pay fucking taxes in the first place. So if we pay our taxes, they cut all this shit, privatize it, and then they like, what will happen is just like Trump always does. He claims that he's cutting taxes for everyone and only does it for the wealthy. Then they're double fucking, like, double dipping, so to speak. They're making insane amounts of money off of like shit that we take for granted now, that everyone fucking makes use of, that's beneficial to everything, including businesses. And it's going to be turned into a fucking shithole. Like, whether you're on the right or the left, either way, you should be fucking fighting against this and making your fucking voice known. Not that I think it'll matter, because Trump's a piece of shit that don't give a fuck about what anybody thinks. Yeah, but here we go again. Like, it's almost like every day there's something new that Trump is doing that's just fucking stupid. Like, absolutely fucking retarded. Anyway, thank you for your time.